mama's life, she's been abused. I've seen her beaten up by her husband so many times I can't remember.
Will you go to your execution with a clean heart? With
Yes.
knowing that, feeling you have done nothing wrong?
Yes.
A decorative wishing well sits in a quiet Texas yard. Pretty. Innocent. The kind of garden feature you'd see in any suburban home. But beneath the bricks and concrete lies something horrifying. A body, wrapped in a sleeping bag, 2 bullets in the head, and the woman who built this grave? She's inside the house right now, calmly serving coffee to the fire department chaplain, asking about her dead husband's life insurance policy. Her name is Betty Lou Beets. She's 62 years old. A grandmother, a great-grandmother. She looks like someone who'd bake cookies for church fundraisers. But Betty isn't baking cookies. She's a killer. A black widow who buried 2 husbands in her backyard and almost got away with it. February 24th, 2000, Huntsville, Texas. 6:18 p.m. Betty Lou Beets lay strapped to a gurney waiting to die. The warden asked if she had any last words. Betty stayed silent. No apologies, no explanations. She just smiled at her lawyer and pastor, closed her eyes and took 2 coughs, 1 sharp breath, then nothing. The state was killing her for murder, cold-blooded, calculated murder. But here's what makes this story truly chilling. Betty didn't kill once. She didn't kill twice. Over 20 years, husband after husband disappeared or ended up shot. Some survived. Others weren't so lucky. How does a hearing-impaired woman from North Carolina become one of the most notorious killers in American history? How did she get away with it for so long? And what finally brought her down? This is Dark Justice Files. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. United States, Europe, Africa, Asia, let us know. If you're new here, welcome to a channel that doesn't just tell crime stories. We reveal the truth behind them. We explore the psychology, the motives, and the life lessons hidden in these dark moments of human history. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss what we have coming. Stay with us because the truth behind Betty's final hours is more chilling than anyone could imagine. How does a grandmother transform into a serial killer? What makes someone capable of looking their own family in the eye, lying about murder, and sleeping peacefully at night? Think about this for a moment. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they weren't who you thought they were? Have you ever met someone who seemed harmless, kind even, but turned out to be dangerous? Could this happen in your community? In your neighborhood? On your street? The terrifying answer is yes. Betty Lou Beets' story isn't just about murder. It's about manipulation, deception, greed. It's about how someone can wear a mask so convincing that even their own children don't see the monster hiding beneath. By the end of this video, you'll understand the warning signs no one saw coming. You'll learn how Betty perfected her deadly game, and you'll discover the one mistake that finally exposed her. But first, if you're already hooked, do me a favor. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to Dark Justice Files and hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who loves true crime. Now let's go back to where it all began. Betty Lou Donovan was born on March 12, 1937, in Roxborough, North Carolina. From the very beginning, Betty's life was marked by tragedy. When she was just 3 years old, Betty contracted measles. The fever burned so intensely that it caused permanent damage. Betty lost most of her hearing. For the rest of her life, she would live in a world of muffled sounds and silence. In the 1940s, there were no special education programs, no hearing aids for poor families. Betty learned to read lips just to survive conversations. School became a nightmare of confusion and isolation. Betty later claimed that when she was 5 years old, her father began sexually abusing her. Whether these claims were true or fabricated later to gain sympathy remains hotly debated. Her father worked as a machinist. The family eventually moved from North Carolina to Hampton, Virginia. They weren't wealthy. They were just getting by. When Betty was 12 years old, everything collapsed. Her mother suffered a complete mental breakdown and was institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital. Overnight, Betty went from being a child to being a parent. She had to cook, clean, and care for her younger siblings while her father worked long hours. Her childhood was over. Betty dropped out of school in the 10th grade. With no mother, limited hearing, and overwhelming pressure, Betty saw only one way out: marriage. In 1952, at just 15 years old, Betty married Robert Franklin Branson. 1 year later, at 16, she gave birth to her first child. While her friends were going to dances, Betty was changing diapers and trying to keep a household together. She later claimed Robert was abusive, though she only made these accusations decades later, after her murder conviction. Their marriage was chaotic. They separated multiple times. At one point, Betty attempted suicide. Over 17 years, they had 6 children together. But Betty wasn't content to play the dutiful wife. She would disappear for hours, frequenting local bars, drinking heavily, flirting with other men. By 1969, Robert had enough. They divorced, and Betty was suddenly a single mother of 6 with no husband, no income, and no prospects. She was 32 years old, and her life was about to take a much darker turn. In 1970, Betty married husband number 2, Billy York Lane. According to Betty, Billy was violent. During one brutal fight, Billy allegedly broke Betty's nose. But Betty didn't call the police. Instead, she grabbed a gun. Betty shot Billy York Lane twice, once in the stomach, once in the back. Somehow, Billy survived. When police arrived, Betty was arrested and charged with attempted murder. But Billy told police he had threatened to kill Betty first. The charges were dropped. And here's where the story gets bizarre. Betty remarried Billy shortly after shooting him. The marriage lasted less than a month. Betty had learned something valuable. She could shoot someone and get away with it. She learned that if she played the victim well enough, people would believe her. By 1978, Betty was on to husband number 3, Ronnie Threlkeld. Betty and Ronnie's marriage quickly devolved into the same pattern of fighting and rage. But this time, Betty didn't reach for a gun. She reached for her car keys. During one heated argument, Betty got into her vehicle and aimed straight for Ronnie. He dove out of the way just in time. The car missed him by inches. Ronnie survived. Like Billy Lane, he would later testify against Betty in court. Betty now had a pattern: 2 ex-husbands who barely escaped with their lives. A criminal record that included public lewdness and firearms violations. But she wasn't done getting married. In 1979, Betty married her 4th husband, Doyle Wayne Barker. It lasted 7 weeks. By 1980, they were separated. Betty told her daughter that Doyle was abusive, controlling, impossible to live with. In October 1981, Doyle Wayne Barker disappeared. No one filed a missing person report. He was a drifter with a criminal past, so people assumed he'd just moved on. But Doyle hadn't left town. He was still there, right beneath Betty's feet, because this time Betty Lou Beets had committed murder. October 1981. Betty Lou Beets made a decision that would change everything. Doyle Wayne Barker had to die. Betty pulled out her .38 caliber pistol. Doyle never saw it coming. She raised the gun and fired. The bullet struck him in the head. He dropped instantly. But killing him was only half the problem. She needed help. She turned to her daughter, Shirley. Together, mother and daughter dragged Doyle's body outside. Betty had already picked the spot, behind the house, near an old storage shed. They buried Doyle Wayne Barker in a shallow grave beneath the shed. When they finished, Betty stepped back and surveyed their work. Perfect. The next day, Betty told people that Doyle had left her. Given his history, no one questioned it. Months passed, then a year, then 2 years. No one came looking for Doyle. Betty had committed the perfect murder, and she had discovered something dangerous. Killing was easy. Covering it up was even easier. But Betty wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. She wanted money, security, comfort. By 1982, Betty was already searching. She frequented bars, social gatherings, anywhere she might meet a man with resources. And she found him, Jimmy Don Beets, a recently retired Dallas firefighter, respected in his community. Most importantly, he had a pension worth $100 and $200 per month and over $100,000 in life insurance. Betty looked at Jimmy Don Beets and saw dollar signs. On August 19, 1982, they got married. Jimmy had no idea he'd just signed his own death warrant. Let's pause for a moment. Betty Lou Beets started as a deaf child from a broken home. She shot one husband twice. She tried to run over another. Both survived, but Doyle Wayne Barker didn't survive. Betty murdered him, buried him in her backyard, and got away with it. Now she's married to Jimmy Don Beets, a man with money, a pension, and life insurance. A man who has no idea his wife is a killer. Here's my question. Do you think Betty was a victim driven to violence, or was she a cold-blooded predator? Drop your answer in the comments below. If this case is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe, because what Betty did next would shock everyone who knew her. Jimmy Don Beets was 46 years old when he married Betty. He was a Dallas firefighter who'd spent his career saving lives. He was the kind of man you could count on in a crisis. He was also exactly what Betty was looking for. The marriage seemed normal at first. They settled near Cedar Creek Lake in Henderson County, Texas. Neighbors saw them together and thought they looked happy. But by the summer of 1983, Betty had made up her mind. Jimmy had to die. August the 6th, 1983. A Saturday evening. Jimmy sat in his favorite recliner, tired from a long day. Betty's son, Robert Branson, was visiting for the weekend. At some point during the evening, Betty pulled Robert aside. She looked him straight in the eye. "I'm done with Jimmy," she said. "I can't do this anymore." Robert assumed she meant divorce. He was wrong. "Jimmy has to die tonight," Betty said flatly. No emotion, no tears. Then she told Robert to leave. Robert didn't argue. He simply walked out, got in his car, and drove away. He left his stepfather alone with his mother. Inside the house, Jimmy Don dozed in his recliner, unsuspecting. Betty walked into the living room carrying her .38 caliber pistol, the same gun she'd used to kill Doyle. Jimmy never saw it coming. Betty raised the gun and fired twice. Both bullets struck him in the head. He slumped forward, blood pooling beneath him. Betty stood there for a moment, watching. No panic, no regret, just cold calculation. 2 hours later, Robert returned. He found his mother waiting calmly in the kitchen. Jimmy's body was still in the recliner. "Help me get rid of the body," Betty said. And Robert did. Together, they carried Jimmy's corpse to the front yard. There stood a decorative wishing well that Jimmy and Robert had built together just months earlier. Now it would become Jimmy's grave. They lowered his body into the well, wrapped him in a sleeping bag, and sealed the bricks. Then they poured concrete over the top. When they finished, the well looked exactly like it had before. Beautiful, innocent, perfect. But Betty wasn't done. She still had to explain Jimmy's disappearance. The next morning, she drove to the marina where Jimmy kept his fishing boat. She crushed up his heart medication and scattered the powder across the deck. Robert removed the propeller. Then they pushed the boat into Cedar Creek Lake. Later that day, Betty called the police. Her husband had gone fishing and never came home, she said. She sounded worried, scared. The boat washed ashore on August 12th. Police believed Betty's story completely. For 3 weeks, rescue crews dragged the lake. Divers searched the murky water. Helicopters circled overhead. Firefighters from Dallas joined the search. They found nothing. The entire time, Betty played her part perfectly. When the fire department chaplain visited to comfort her, she didn't ask about the search. She asked about the life insurance, the pension benefits, how much money she would get. Nobody suspected that Jimmy's body lay buried just 50 feet from where they sat talking. The perfect crime. Or so Betty thought. For nearly 2 years, Betty lived as a free woman. Jimmy was officially listed as a drowning victim. Betty collected his pension checks. She filed for his life insurance. But in the spring of 1985, everything changed. An anonymous tip came into the Henderson County Sheriff's Office. The caller said Jimmy hadn't drowned. He'd been murdered. And Betty Lou Beets was the killer. The tip was too detailed to ignore. Detectives reopened the investigation immediately. On June 8, 1985, deputies arrived at Betty's home with an arrest warrant. She answered the door calmly, showing no surprise, no fear. Detectives also had a search warrant. Betty watched from a police car as investigators began tearing apart her yard. In the front yard, investigators found the decorative wishing well. When they broke through the concrete, they found something horrifying: human remains, a body wrapped in a sleeping bag, 2 bullet wounds to the head. It was Jimmy Don Beets. The detectives kept digging. Behind the house, under an old storage shed, they made another gruesome discovery. Doyle Wayne Barker. Just like Jimmy, Doyle had been shot in the head. Ballistics tests confirmed the same weapon killed both men, a .38 caliber pistol registered to Betty Lou Beets. Betty's son, Robert Branson, came forward. He told investigators everything: how his mother had confessed her plan to kill Jimmy, how she'd sent him away that night, how he'd helped bury the body. The case against Betty Lou Beets was rock solid. She'd fooled everyone for years, but her perfect crimes had finally fallen apart. Betty Lou Beets was charged with capital murder. The state of Texas was seeking the death penalty. On July 11, 1985, Betty Lou Beets walked into the 173rd District Court of Henderson County, Texas. She was 48 years old and facing the death penalty. Betty pleaded not guilty. Her defense strategy was shocking: blame her own children for the murders. It would backfire completely. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had the bodies, the murder weapon, a clear financial motive. But their most powerful witness was Betty's own son. Robert Branson took the stand and destroyed his mother's defense. He told the jury exactly what happened on August 6, 1983. How Betty had said Jimmy had to die. How she had sent him away so she could commit murder. How he'd helped bury the body. Most damaging of all, Robert called his mother a very selfish woman who cared only about money. The prosecution hammered home their case. Betty had killed Jimmy Don Beets for $110,000 in life insurance and a $1,200 monthly pension. She wasn't a battered wife defending herself. She was a black widow who murdered husbands for profit. 2 former husbands, Billy York Lane and Ronnie Threlkeld, also testified. Billy showed the jury his scars from where Betty had shot him twice. Ronnie recounted how Betty had tried to run him over. The jury heard it all: the violence, the greed, the lies.
My mama's life, she's been abused. I've seen her beaten up by her husband so many times I can't remember.
My dad never beat her. There is no police reports, no hospital reports of any abuse anywhere.
Betty's defense tried to argue she had been abused throughout her life. But there was a major problem. No evidence of abuse had been presented during the trial. No medical records, no police reports. Betty's claims only surfaced after she was arrested. On October 11, 1985, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty. Murder for remuneration. 3 days later, on October 14th, they sentenced Betty Lou Beets to death. She became Texas Department of Criminal Justice Death Row inmate number 810. Betty wasn't giving up without a fight. Her first appeal actually worked. In 1988, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned her conviction, but the state requested a rehearing, and the conviction was reinstated. For the next decade, Betty's case bounced through the legal system, appeal after appeal, motion after motion. None of it worked. By 1999, she had run out of options. On February 24, 2000, her execution date was set. This time, there would be no more stays. In her final days, Betty's daughters made one last desperate attempt. They appeared before the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles with photographs showing bruises, a swollen face, broken bones. They begged the board to spare Betty's life. The board wasn't convinced. The execution would proceed. Governor George W. Bush reviewed the case and declined to grant a delay. On February 24, 2000, Betty was transferred to the Huntsville unit. She was given the chance to request a final meal. She declined. When asked if she had any last words, Betty stayed silent. No apologies, no explanations. At 6:18 p.m., Betty was strapped to the gurney in the death chamber. Jimmy's son, Jaime, sat in the witness room, watching the woman who had killed his father. Doyle's son, Rodney, was there too. Betty didn't look scared. She didn't cry or beg for mercy. As the lethal drugs began flowing, Betty offered a small smile to her attorney and pastor. Then came 2 coughs and a sharp gasp. At 6:18 p.m., Betty Lou Beets was pronounced dead. She was 62 years old. After her execution, Betty's body was cremated. Her ashes were scattered over her mother's grave. Betty left behind 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. She also left behind 2 confirmed victims and questions about how many others she might have killed. So now you know the full story of Betty Lou Beets, the deaf child from North Carolina, who became one of America's most notorious killers. But here's the question that still divides people today. Was Betty Lou Beets a cold-blooded killer who used abuse as an excuse? Or was she a genuinely traumatized woman pushed beyond her breaking point? She claimed she was sexually abused as a child. Her mother was institutionalized. She married at 15. She had 6 children. She said every husband beat her. But she only made these claims after she was caught, after the bodies were found. So what do you think? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand. Was justice served when Betty was executed? Or should she have spent life in prison instead? If this case made you think, hit that like button. If it shocked you, share this video. And if you want more cases like this, real crime, real consequences, real lessons, subscribe to Dark Justice Files right now. Betty Lou Beets' case teaches us several critical lessons. First, warning signs. Betty displayed a clear pattern of escalating violence. She shot her second husband twice. She tried to run over her third husband. Both survived, but authorities treated them as isolated domestic incidents. When someone shows you they're capable of violence, believe them. Betty's pattern was there for anyone willing to look. Second, the abuse debate. Betty claimed lifelong abuse, but only after her arrest. No medical records supported her story. No police reports documented the violence she described. Genuine abuse victims often stay silent for years, but they also typically have some evidence: scars, hospital visits, witnesses. Betty had none of this until after her conviction. Third, the psychological profile. Was Betty a sociopath who felt no remorse? The evidence suggests yes. She buried 2 men in her yard and slept peacefully at night. She collected insurance money while their bodies rotted outside her window. She smiled at her lawyer minutes before her execution. That's not the behavior of someone haunted by guilt. That's the behavior of someone who views other people as tools to be used and discarded. Fourth, Betty represents what criminologists call a black widow killer, women who murder multiple partners for financial gain. These cases are rarer than male serial killers, but they're often more calculated. Fifth, her case raises questions about the death penalty itself. Some argue she deserved the ultimate punishment. Others believe life in prison would have been sufficient. Finally, consider the impact on her family. Betty's children testified against her. They helped bury bodies. Her victims' families lost fathers and husbands. Violence doesn't just destroy the victim, it destroys everyone connected to both the victim and the perpetrator. Betty Lou Beets made choices. She chose violence. She chose murder. She chose greed over human life. And in the end, those choices cost her everything. Betty Lou Beets' story is a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it looks like a grandmother. Sometimes it hides behind claims of victimhood while burying bodies in the backyard. The truth is simple. Betty had choices at every turn. She could have left her abusive relationships. She could have sought help. She could have chosen a different path. Instead, she chose murder, twice. And she would have kept killing if she hadn't been stopped. Her story should make us more vigilant, more aware, more willing to recognize warning signs before it's too late. If this case opened your eyes to the darker side of human nature, then my job here is done. But before you go, I need you to do something. Subscribe to Dark Justice Files right now. We bring you true crime cases that matter, stories with real lessons, real consequences, and real impact. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. Like this video if it made you think. Share it with someone who loves true crime. And drop a comment telling me what case you want us to cover next. Check the description below for links to our other episodes. We've got cases that will keep you up at night. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, stay vigilant, stay informed, stay safe. Until next time. Next time on Dark Justice Files. A case so twisted, so unexpected that even experienced investigators were left speechless. A crime that happened in plain sight. A criminal no one suspected. And a truth that will make you question everything you thought you knew about trust. This isn't just another murder case. This is a story about betrayal at the highest level. About someone who wore a mask so convincing that even the people closest to them never saw what was coming. The clues were there. The warning signs were all present. But by the time anyone noticed, it was already too late. You won't want to miss this one. It will challenge your assumptions. It will make you uncomfortable. And it will remind you that the most dangerous predators are often the ones hiding in plain sight. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Because this next case, it's going to stay with you long after the video ends. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay aware, and never stop questioning what's really happening around you. This is Dark Justice Files. We'll see you in the next one.